I remember hearing the late John Peel discussing the first punk rockers that he ever saw in the mid-70s on the King's Road in London. And he saw these characters outlandishly dressed and thought that they should be variously sectioned, conscripted, jailed, etc. And then a couple of days later saw the same people and thought they looked absolutely brilliant. And that happens sometimes. You get a completely unexpected, unlooked for reversal of opinion. It happened to me with regard to churches. If you'd have asked me in 1989, I'd have said that they were horrible, musty death receptacles, redolent with the atmosphere of Sunday evenings and unfinished homework, or something like that. And then a year later, without any seminal occurrence of any kind, I was asking my mother, who worked at Lye Library at the time, to bring me home books on them. I studied these books, and I became conversant in all of the Anglican cathedrals that Philip Larkin and his girlfriend visited in Unlucky Charms, perhaps, or whatever that poem's actually called. And then I was in Stourbridge High Street, unsurprisingly for any of you who've ever watched any of these videos before, in a charity shop, and I found a book called Britain from the Air. I opened it almost at random, looked through a couple of pages first, and found a double-page spread with two huge Gothic churches, one on each page. And even though I'd just been reading about Gothic churches, I couldn't identify either of them. One was Selby, the other was Beverley. And I think there are a lot of people well versed in history and architecture who couldn't name either on sight. They seem to have slipped into pockets of obscurity. But no matter, they're fabulous and worth visiting. Alec Clifton Taylor visited them, as did John Betjeman. I feel a bit John Betjeman today, my jacket's a little bit tight. Like he is on the front cover of Summoned by Bells. Here's Johnny. Actually, can you imagine if he was in The Shining and he comes through the door saying, "Here's Johnny." And equally you could have Jack Nicholson reciting, "Come friendly bombs and fall on Slough. It isn't fit for humans now." You could have a lot of fun with that particular template of reciprocity, I think. Actually, if I had my time again, I think I would go back to the early 80s and form a band called Templates of Reciprocity. And first on the set list would be Pockets of Obscurity by Templates of Reciprocity. You'd think that if I had the opportunity to reconfigure my life in retrospect, that I'd do something a little bit more productive than form a rubbish named early 80s band. But you'd be wrong. They're only a different colour to normal, but there's something disproportionately exciting about these magnolia phone boxes, like coloured vinyl, or when you see the box pews in a church painted in an unusual colour. I don't know why. Is it that they hint at some kind of different reality, alternate possibilities? Wait a minute, that car's the same colour. Is it spreading? By the time I get home, are my wife and children and my home and street going to be magnolia too? Half of me hopes so. The marketplace in Beverley, reminiscent of a lot of places. Swaffham, Wantage, Prince's Risborough, Leighton Buzzard. But then your eyes register that little sight bite that is St Mary's Tower, sticking over the top. Or, if you're looking the other way, the West Towers of the Minster. And then it's only reminiscent of itself. I like the way that the grapes and browns occupy the space in the centre of the marketplace there. It's like they've huddled together suddenly for a photograph, with the tall and distinguished visitor of St Mary's peeking over from behind. Last time I came to Beverley, I didn't notice how brilliant the street and alleyway names were. I think it's fitting, or some might argue unfair, that as well as having two of Britain's greatest churches, Beverley's also got arguably Britain's greatest pub, or certainly one of them, the White Horse, known locally as Nellie's. And like great churches, it's full of all those accidental rhythms, those views that you see, like a cutaway drawing. Also, it's got that quality that visits to the ABC cinema in Lower High Street in Stourbridge used to have when I was a kid, after whatever Doug McClure film that I was watching had finished. That sense of coming back out into the world that had been shut away. That sense of a disproportionate amount of time having passed. The shock that it's still light outside. And whenever I come in here, my mind has to adjust in the same way as your eyes adjust to the dark. Adjust to the tone and the rhythm and the proportions and the quality of sound. Watching the fruit machine flickering through the darkening glass makes me feel like an 18th century time traveller, or maybe an 18th century patron who was cryogenically frozen and awoken to see that Nellie's he kind of knew but kind of didn't. If I'm cryogenically frozen, like Simon Cowell or that guy from Futurama, I hope that I'm similarly tolerant of modern encumbrances that I do not understand. In St Mary's, as often as not mistaken for the Minster, and amongst other delights, a full set of 15th century misericords featuring a surprising preponderance of dogs. Dogs doing all manner of things. Dogs at the feet of chaps on mythical beasts, dogs attacking mythical beasts, dogs in curious positions, dogs just being dogs, and some flying dogs, which you don't see every day. More's the pity. Even in fact, dogs appearing to hold a book open for a kind of bird-like, griffin-y creature to enable him to read. Aww. Little architectural moments like this remind you of the riot of colour that most medieval churches would have been. I'm not sure which I prefer, the stripped down moments of incident like this, or the whole thing in resplendent medieval technicolor. Frederick Elwell's The Last Cab, putting me in mind of last of the steam-powered trains from Village Green Preservation Society, amongst other things. I like this idea of paintings just hung around the town, like it's a giant drawing room. I don't know what the effect on the local populace would be if you hung some of Francis Bacon's Screaming Popes, or perhaps some of Jeff Koons' more questionable works around Birdcage Walk. But then some of the things you do see in Dudley Town Centre. And then all of a sudden, when you least expect it, the town turns almost entirely into Bridge North. Almost entirely, that is. Save for the presence of these stupendously exciting curved wrought iron banisters, like the forearms of great praying mantises. I was thinking of overhauling my look, being as I turn 50 next year, and that little devil up there on the building puts me in mind of the Colts Little Devil, and maybe Ian Asprey would be a good look to go for, a good template. Sort of big floppy hat, long straight hair, humorless expression. What do you think?
I think it's a winner.
Yeah? What about you?
Yeah.
When you hit 50, what kind of sort of visual change are you going to go for?
For years now, I've thought that when I hit 50, I'm going for the Milli Vanilli look.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sort of like, or the London Boys, that sort of thing.
Yeah, London Boys.
Yeah. Less clothes, extreme.
Extreme.
That's
Nuno Betancourt.
That's what you want. That's it. You've got it. Holy Mother of God, have you seen this caterpillar here?
What on earth is that?
I don't know. I suppose I should know at my age, but I don't. I've got no idea what it's going to turn into either. I'd be quite unsurprised, actually, if it turned into one or both of the London Boys. Or Extreme. Women and children soon will be shepherding. I first saw Beverley Minster looming across the fields, all closely huddled spikes and spirelets, pinnacles and buttresses, on a dark, wet Sunday morning back in the summer of 1994. I remember coming inside and being awed by the cleanliness of it, the flush vistas, the stylistic unity. That kind of thing spoke very fluently and forcefully to me back then. Nowadays I tend to be more moved by the canted angles and the hodgepodgery of the more organic country churches that I cherish. So seeing this again after all these years is like listening to an old tape of my favourite records from 30 years ago. You know, one of those tapes where there's a funny bit in the middle because you pressed record by accident thinking it was the stop button when your mum came in the room and you were jumping around with an intense expression on your face. If you've got no idea what I'm talking about, ask a grown-up. In fact, such was my thirst for stylistic unity back then that I was quite offended by the inclusion of monuments and memorials from later periods. I remember going to Bayeux the following year and being appalled by a great globe-like edifice that sits in the middle of the nave. Looked at it on the internet the other day, looked great. Makes you realise that what you think when you're 27 isn't going to be what you think for the rest of your life. Maybe one day, I don't know. My opinions will entirely change. I'll think Colin Farrell's a great actor. Who knows? The other thing about liking churches when you were 27 was that it was another little motif for your personality. People didn't expect it from you. It was a little bit like being Ron Mayle of Sparks, with that moustache and slick back hair in the 70s. Gets less fun as you get old, though, like most things. If you don't believe me, ask Ron Mayle. This end of the church abounds with memories and associations. It's a bit like Lincoln Cathedral, a bit like Gloucester Cathedral, even a little bit like the church at Grey Rollright and Little Rollright too, for that matter. Behind me, that window looks very much like the Prisoners of Conscience window by Gabriel Loire. Great stained glass at Salisbury Cathedral. It might even be by him, I haven't checked. And these guys here, which I like a lot, are a little bit like the Rollright stones themselves, but even more like the spirit of dark water, the bedwettingly terrifying public health and safety information advert that I used to cower outside the front room door from in fear of during the breaks in Planet of the Apes, because I'd convinced my 8-year-old self that it was only on then, even though it was obviously just because it was later in the evening that I was seeing the advert. I'm talking about the televised version of Planet of the Apes, and therefore the disappointing version. It's like Planet of the Apes on TV, the second side of when the band comes in, as Jarvis Cocker said. First time I've ever mentioned Jarvis Cocker in one of these little films. Surprising, that. Now or when, a kind of alternative memento mori. Reminds me of the last scene in The Sopranos. Either Tony's going to die there or some other time. Fabulous stuff. Even made me like Journey's Don't Stop Believing, and that takes some doing. What could you see out the front of your house when you were growing up, Harris?
Other houses, virtually identical houses.
Me too.
That's what I can see at the house I live in now.
Yeah, me too. It's a good point. I wonder what effect it would have had if I could have seen that. What effect it does have on the growing mind. Would it elevate and edify you, or would it just recede into the background of your consciousness to be reignited later on? To the medieval mind, it was supposed to be your first glimpse of the glory of heaven after waking from death, wasn't it? It'd be nice to wake from life and look at it though, every morning, wouldn't it? That's a funny thing, the graveyard spilling over the road. A little bit like those bits on Google Street View, where someone's legs are one side of the street and their body is the other. Back in the summer of 1994, I left my tent early one morning. I'd been reading, I think it was The Cut Glass Bowl by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I walked across the field and sat and did a little pencil sketch of Beverley Minster from this angle and a little further that way. The point is that when I remembered this the other day, for just a fraction of a second, I considered looking it up on the internet before I remembered that that wasn't possible if you'd just done a drawing years ago and didn't even know where it was and hadn't posted it. But it's not possible now. But who knows? Back then, I wouldn't have believed you if you'd told me that shows about baking were phenomenal draws on British television, or that David Essex would be in EastEnders. Look what they've done to the rock and roll clown. Rock and roll clown, now he's down on the ground. Well, he used to skyfly, now he crashed out the sky. That sort of thing. Actually, Harris, speaking of your recent European travels and Brescia and the slightly Giorgio de Chirico quality that it had, that blackened tower over there looks a bit Giorgio de Chirico to me. Do you think?
Yeah, it does. Where did all the cows go?
Actually, that's a good point. There were loads of them here a minute ago, weren't there? Actually, I wonder. I was in a charity shop in Stourbridge, that one up the passage opposite where Mark and Moody's used to be, and I found a book on sloths once, and it was full of lots of sloth facts, some of which I've since come to think were perhaps apocryphal. One of which was the fact that once a year, I think around this time of year, sloths just disappear for 2 weeks and no one knows where they go, and then they just come back. And maybe the cows have gone there, or their equivalent of. It also had a couple of other strange facts. It had an excellent picture of a sloth asleep in the middle of a busy motorway as well, and it had just fallen asleep. It couldn't quite make it across, which made me very happy for quite a long time. But the other fact that sticks in my memory was the fact that if two sloths meet on a branch, they have to fight to the death, which calls forth the question, how long does that take, considering that algae grows on them, that they move so slowly. Also, it brings forth the idea of cows meeting on a branch and fighting to the death. So yeah, perhaps they're fighting to the death on a branch, or they've just gone somewhere and they're coming back again.
No, they're over there.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh.